Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the first Global Dialogue series of the year, hosted by the World Climate Institute and in association with the Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Indian Green Business Council. Well, our mission today is to explore leadership in action, the lessons and opportunities. My name is Laura Buckwell, and it's a great pleasure to be your host for the rest of the day. Well, we are here in the vibrant city of Ahmedabad and broadcasting live in India's G20 presidency year as well, a very fruitful year ahead, in fact. The event today, by the way, is being streamed live on the WCI website, that is the worldclimateinstitute.org. And to join the conversation, please do use our Twitter handle, which is @WCIUpdates. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for the next 90 minutes, we are going to be joined by a rotation of prominent experts from around the world. And we'd like to start today with a very special guest who's come all the way from the UK, in fact. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, who is an MP, Director of Climate and Parliament, and former Shadow Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change for the UK government. He is also the recipient of the illustrious Padma Shri Award here from India. He is here to talk about climate leadership and the role that parliamentarians can play in helping countries realize their climate targets. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Give a very warm welcome to the Honourable Barry Gardiner, MP. Please do be seated.
Thank you.
So we have very little time, of course, as always, and so much to talk about. Thank you so much for being with us here today, first and foremost. I wanted to put you straight in the deep end, actually, if you don't mind. If you had to describe the current state of climate leadership in just one word, what would that be?
One word.
One word. You've just got one word. That's it.
Unscientific.
Interesting.
What do the scientists tell us? They tell us that there is a limit to the emissions that we can put into the atmosphere. We probably have about 8 or 9 years left before we reach the 1.5 degree threshold that the Paris Climate Agreement has set. Now, we are acting as if we can stand up against the laws of physics and say, no, you don't seem to realize that actually our population won't accept that. Or we can't possibly, change our entire energy power system in such a short space of time. We can't argue with the planet. We can't argue with the science. And yet what's happening is governments around the world, leaders around the world are saying, well, actually, we'll set targets, but they won't be adequate. Or we'll set adequate targets, but we won't then put in place the policies to implement those targets. And, the atmosphere, it's like a car park. You can get so many emissions in there, but if you try and push too many in, they start falling over the edge. And that's where we are. We're at that sort of tipping point stage. And you look at what's happened in India in the past year. The heat waves, the drought, the impact on farmers. Look at what's happened over the past 5 years. 70 million hectares of productive farmland in India has been lost. Why? Because of climate change, because of drought.
And didn't HSBC also name India as the most vulnerable country when it comes to climate change?
Yes, you're right. They did, and for a number of reasons there. But I think, look, there are also seeds of hope in India. And I think it's very easy to simply paint a picture of doom and gloom and it's all going to be dreadful. That doesn't motivate people. What motivates people is going out there and saying, look, this is a huge opportunity. It's a huge economic opportunity. I hope in some of the other discussions we have this afternoon, we'll see just what those economic opportunities are. But this is a transformation of our system that is really worth having. You look out over the skyline in Ahmedabad today, and hey, it's hazy. It's cloudy. What is that? It's pollution. You get rid of climate change, you get rid of fossil fuel emissions, and actually you have a cleaner atmosphere, you have healthier people, you have a healthier workforce. There are so many positives that are going to come with this transformation. And the economic opportunities are superb, because if you look now at the relative costs of producing electricity by solar versus fossil fuels, hey, solar wins hands down. And that, for India, is an enormous opportunity, because here we have a country blessed with so much solar power. And of course, as a good Gujarati, I hope that Gujarat's going to be right at the center of that.
Sure it will.
And,
sure it will.
You know, we've got the green hub here in Gujarat. So I think there's a lot to be excited about.
But also, change isn't just going to happen overnight. It's going to be a long process, and it can be quite chaotic. Change is always chaotic. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. And there are also people who want to resist that change. Change is difficult. It's difficult, we know that at a personal level. And it's about changing the practices that we have around the world. I come from a country, you know, unlike here in India, I come from a country where, you know, people eat a lot of meat. Changing their practice so they adopt a more vegetarian-based diet or a plant-based diet is going to be very difficult. But it's happening. It's happening quite steadily. 10 years ago, if you said you were a vegetarian in the UK, you were odd. If you said you were a vegan in the UK, you were even odder. True. Now, there are so many vegan restaurants, it's all on the menu. These are the changes that are happening. And sometimes we look and think, oh, we haven't gone far enough. And we haven't. But the good news is actually we've covered a huge distance already, and we just have to keep going.
Very quickly, I'm watching the time, of course. Let's take a little bit, take a look at the role of parliamentarians. And
right, yeah.
What can they play in terms of change? And do you think it's a matter of getting more diplomats out there when it comes to global change? I mean, what is the way forward?
Listen, you're going to be interviewing diplomats later, so Freddie can answer that one. But parliamentarians play a critical role, because they're the people ultimately that decide on the legislation. But they do more than that. They don't just vote through legislation, they also hold the government's feet to the fire. They're the ones who say, well, look, you've promised this, you've set these targets in place, but you're nowhere near achieving them. Now, if you look at the targets that India has set for renewables up to 2030, I think the expectation is that there will be 50 gigawatt of renewables into play. But actually, India is already set to overachieve that target by about 66, 67%. What does that tell you as a legislator? It can either tell you, how wonderful, isn't it amazing what we're doing? Or it can tell you this, you know what? We set targets, not that were in line with the science, but targets that we knew we could achieve so we would look good when we said that we met the targets. Now, the legislators are the people charged with actually judging which way the government's done this. Has it just overachieved magnificently, or did it set targets that were too low? And these are the sort of things that legislators have to really critique government about. And there are different systems around the world. In my own parliament, we have a system of select committees, and we grill ministers. And we grill ministers from the same party as ourselves. So we make sure that we're holding their feet to the fire. We're making sure that not just they meet the commitments that they've made, but they've actually made the right commitments.
Do you think that the world is now looking more towards the south then when it comes to climate leadership? Of course, Africa, the Middle East, India, of course. And why is that, do you think? And what sort of opportunities are there, especially in this part of the world?
Well, look, I think COP27 that we've just had last month in Sharm el-Sheikh was a very good example of that. It was the first COP to be held in Africa. It was billed as the African COP. And the influence that African nations and the Global South were able to exert on that COP really did change the outcomes. I'd been pushing for many years to try and ensure that loss and damage was right at the forefront of the decision-making. It happened. It happened in Sharm el-Sheikh. And that was a huge thing that it did happen. Because that means that countries who have suffered because of climate change, they've suffered the damage. They've experienced the floods. They've experienced the droughts. They've lost the agricultural base. They're the ones who will actually be able to get some compensation for that. So, yeah, it's really important. And if you look at the work that India was doing at that COP, India came out at that COP and said, look, we don't just need to phase down coal, which was the decision taken in the Glasgow COP. We actually need to phase down fossil fuels. Now, that was a huge thing for India to come out and say and to support at the COP. So you do see countries from the Global South increasingly taking that leadership role. And I think that's really, really important that they do.
It really is. What examples do you think can nations such as India set for the global community? What are they leaders in when it comes to this space, and what example can they set?
Well, look, there's a number of things that India is doing. I would say that the Solar Alliance that India has is really superb. The One Sun, One World, One Grid that Narendra Modi launched, first of all in Paris, and then that we had the grid structure added on in Glasgow. So we're looking at a global green grid structure. Now that is real innovation. To be able to say that you produce solar power here in India, you then have interconnection that goes through right across the stands into North Africa, up into Europe, so that the world is beginning to see that it's connected in its energy matrix. That's absolutely critical.
One of my last questions to you, actually, I wanted to go over, take a look at the UK for a moment. Your thoughts on the UK announcement of £30 million that was deployed to support developing countries to protect 30% of land and ocean by 2030. That was recently announced, I believe. Tell us about your thoughts on that package.
Well, look, this is actually not something that is predominantly about climate change. This was a decision that was taken at COP15 rather than COP27. COP15 was the Convention on Biological Diversity Conference of the Party that took place in Montreal just after we'd had COP27. And I think the importance of this is that increasingly the world is coming to realize that there is not simply a climate crisis. It's a climate and biodiversity crisis. It's a climate and nature crisis. If you look at the Living Index report that came out, there has been a 69% decline in species abundance since 1970. 69% of all the species on the planet have reduced in their numbers. So that is quite extraordinary. But the 30 million that the UK, it's a figure, £30 million. What is that going to achieve internationally? Next to nothing. But it will have some key projects towards that. Having those targets, though, 30% of protected areas, it is important to have the targets. But as we were saying before, it's much more important that we have the policies in place to achieve them. And I remember when the first round of what are known as NBSAPs, that's National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plans, right? Crazy mnemonic, but there we are, came out. And actually, I won't name the country, but in one of the country's NBSAPs, these strategic action plans that were supposed to be signed off by ministers, they made all these wonderful boasts about, 17% of our land is protected area, we do all this. And then they said in the plan, but actually, whenever poachers come and invade those protected areas and take out wildlife, what's happening is the real problem we have is not that it's not designated a protected area. The problem is that our ministers and our judges let these people off the hook when they come to court. Now, what did that show? It showed that no minister had ever read that NBSAP. They never read, they didn't know what their targets were. They didn't know what their protected areas were. I'm happy to say that their second NBSAP wasn't that bad. But you have to make sure that you're not just creating paper parks, whether on land or in sea. Protected areas must be protected. It's now not about targets and protected areas, it's about implementation. It's about making sure that you are delivering the emissions reductions, you're delivering the adaptation in climate, you're making sure that the areas that you're protecting see that enhancement of biodiversity, that increase in habitat that is so important for the whole climate and environmental catastrophe that's going on.
Fantastic dialogue there. I think that's quite a good point to bring in our next guest. We actually have another guest joining us on our conversation, if you don't mind, to expand on the North-South strategies to tackle climate change, as well as collaboration opportunities that also need to be accelerated to bridge the gap. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming His Excellency Freddie Span, the Danish Ambassador to India. Very warm welcome. A very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. I hope you have good questions.
I do,
I have
of
good
course.
answers.
Of course we do. Well, yes, please do join our conversation. Now, Your Excellency, I wanted to start off with what's happening over in Denmark. It's very interesting indeed, in fact, because Denmark is almost completely powered by renewable energy.
Yes.
How has that happened? Tell us how that's been achieved, and do you think that is going to be sustainable?
Of course, it will be sustainable. It is sustainable. It takes three actors, so to say: visionary politicians, research development, meaning the institutions, universities, and a proactive business sector. These three will do it. That was exactly what happened when Denmark was facing the energy crisis back in the 1970s. At that time, we were 100% dependent on fossil fuel, imported fuel. And then suddenly we had no supply, and then we had to reinvent ourselves, and we redefined the wind turbine industry. Today, the wind turbine industry is a double-digit billion US dollar industry, creating a lot of jobs across the world. That can happen, that should happen, and that will happen also in India.
And as we mentioned earlier, you know, that element of change is always going to be chaotic. You're never going to get away from that. But it's transitioning to that change, and how you do it, I suppose, in the most sort of easiest way possible is very important as well. Tell us what's happening over in the UK in terms of renewables and renewable energy. Do you think
we're not at Denmark's stage yet, but we're doing quite well. We have 43% of our energy, our power system, coming from renewables. And there have been whole periods during the past few years where we have had no fuel and fossil fuel on the system at all. So we're getting there. And I have to admit, and Freddie, I know is going to love this, and I'm sorry if
Listen carefully,
that he is going to enjoy this. But Dong Energy, which is the Danish company, does actually make most of the wind turbines that we use in the UK. We have the wind resource, but I have to say, they actually make the product, and they make it very well. So, Freddie, we should do a double act, I think.
Yeah, we should,
Please
of course.
do. We were just talking about some of the opportunities between the global north and south. Tell us a little bit more about your 5-year action plan between Denmark and India and how that's actually progressing, because that was signed in 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true, but it all started with what we call the Green Strategic Partnership. And that was conceived based on two really simple, definitions. The Honorable Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, has launched every year a number of missions. And these missions are developing India. So we decided that on our side, where we are very strong, that is for the green transition, that we would like to combine our skills, our technologies, our experiences with what is on the table, on the agenda of India. That's why we brought in our skills. We built up this Green Strategic Partnership. And then we have an elaborated work plan that sets out very specific KPIs for a number of sectors. And that's working, and it's not just nice political declarations. It's really changing our world, it's changing the planet, it's changing India, and luckily it's also changing Denmark. So it's the best concept ever invented.
Brilliant. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Oh,
Don't
yeah,
you?
of course. They are not that green, so they don't understand it.
So what exactly, tell us a little bit more about some of the strategies that are happening over at the Danish embassy that are working to propel this partnership on the ground here in India. What's happening over at the embassy?
Embassy, we are just bureaucrats, and there are too many bureaucrats around, but we are trying really to change things. What is important is that we are not just sitting in our office, nice offices in Delhi. We are really out on ground. We have a lot of ongoing projects in Tamil Nadu, Assam, even here in Gujarat and so forth. And we need to go out. We need to work, and we need to identify the opportunities, but also the challenges, because green transition as such is a very nice political statement, but to do it on ground takes a lot of effort. So you need to connect with the local situation and the context, and we are doing that. So we have a number of projects, and we are very, very soon going to announce even bigger projects in a number of states. Luckily, India has a structure with a lot of states, and they are organizing constantly based a little bit on the concept of Vibrant Gujarat. So there are so many investment summits and so forth. And next upcoming will be in UP, and there will come with some big announcements, stating, showing that we can do changes. And if there are anybody from the state government of Gujarat that would like to see a change, please call me, and we'll help you change.
You heard it here first. There you go. Thank you so much. Well, it's very easy, of course, for like-minded countries to collaborate because they have the same type of vision, I suppose. But what about those with differences and different outlooks? How do we get everyone on board? That's to both of you.
You're a politician, so you start, and I give the right answer.
Yeah, that's right. You'll make sure that the audience know what I meant to say. Look, I think you start off by acknowledging that we have a common problem. And we can either, when you've got a common problem, and you can see this in a family, you can see it in a city, you can see it in a country, or you can look at it globally. When you have a common problem, you can do one of two things. You can either start saying, well, that's your fault. Or, no, I didn't do that. It's because you did. You can start dividing and start pointing the finger and blaming people and start saying, well, I think you should do this. And actually, that's what the world did, and here Freddie's not going to like it so much, at Copenhagen in 2009. But you'll acknowledge that. It was the Copenhagen Conference of the Parties, COP15, and the global north believed that it could go round and wag its finger at the world and say, you should be doing this, and you should be doing this, and these are the targets we're going to set you. And it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. In Paris, they turned it upside down. And they said, no, look, it's not about telling people what to do. It's about voluntary commitments. It's about each country understanding that this is a common problem that we have to solve together. And if we don't solve it together, we're not going to solve it at all, and that will be a disaster for all of us. And so I really think that it is now about saying, okay, yes, it's a common problem, but we have different responsibilities. And that was way back in the Kyoto Protocol. That was why it talked about common but differentiated responsibilities for each of the member states. And so what we have to do now is we have to say, well, what are these responsibilities and why are they different? And what is fair? Because you can't expect Vanuatu to do the same as China. You can't expect China to do the same as Germany. And there are different assessments of fairness. In fact, if you look at what the IPC says, the IPCC, the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change, they say that there's about 40 different ways of calculating fairness. You know, if you're India, you might say, well, actually, look at our per capita emissions. Our per capita emissions are so low, you know, we need to get our per capita emissions up more to the level of the UK or to heaven forfend, the US. No. There's another way of looking at it and saying, what is the historic responsibility? Well, hey, the UK started the Industrial Revolution, and it may now only be putting in about 2% or less than 2% of global emissions, but it did start it off, and it did benefit from it. So it has a historic responsibility. Or you could say, well, actually, look at what the total net emissions from that baseline are, in which case China is now in the lead. You've got the US second, but India is actually right up there in the top 5 in terms of total emissions over that historical period. So there's lots of ways you can do it. And the trick has been to say, well, let's take a basket and say there is a range of things that a country can do so that its policies and its targets fall into that fair range. And at the moment, let me tell you where we in the UK are falling down. Our targets are deemed sufficient to get us to, just about get us to 1.5. The policies in place are not, I have to tell you. But our targets are the right targets. But we are insufficient in the funding that we're prepared to give to other countries to enable them to do what they need to do. Critically insufficient. So we need to be much more open in the UK about the commitment that we made years ago as a global community to put in $100 billion a year into the Global Climate Fund so that developing countries could actually afford to make the transition that they need to make. So it's a common problem. We have different responsibilities, but if we start bickering about it, we will all fail.
I'm a little conscious of the time, so I'd like to just throw over to Your Excellency.
Yeah, I'm not a politician, so I don't need so many words to explain the same. We, of course, Denmark takes, and I take the really strong view, no preaching, no teaching. That's so important. The Honorable Prime Minister has launched One Earth, One Family, One Future. And I think that is really encapsulating whatever we need to do. And we cannot tell India, seen from my point of view, we can't not tell India to stop using coal. Because the economic social impacts are so huge. We should turn it around and say, we'd like you to invest. We'd like to bring our technologies. We'd like to bring our skills to you so you can really grow your renewables. That's how it should be. And one thing which I think, whether we are from a political sphere or a diplomatic sphere, or whether we are from India or where we are, what counts is what the Honorable Prime Minister launched in October last year, Mission Life. We have to take an individual responsibility. You can't ask Barry, you can't ask diplomats, you can't ask the bureaucrats to do everything for you. You have to do it yourself. And that's where I see India with G20 setting a new agenda, and hopefully in September this year, the summit will produce tangibles. So next year I'm being invited here. Barry and I can say, we made it. Not the two of us, but the world made it.
We've got a couple of minutes left. I actually wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been here for a while in the state of Gujarat, Your Excellency, and I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about what has sort of impressed you the most in terms of climate action and some of the initiatives that have been laid out. What has impressed you the most?
I came to Gujarat 14th of May 2011. That was my first visit to Gujarat. I saw bumpy roads, but I also met then Chief Minister, who was a business leader, a business CEO for a green transition 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, a decade. And when I have been visiting Gujarat over the years, I have seen huge improvements. It's not just nice political statements and there's nothing on ground. You see things that have been changed. And I see it also for India as such. So Gujarat, it all started, but beyond that, India is moving. And there's no solution whatever to any global issue without India being part of the equation. Therefore, India cannot fail, should not fail, and will not fail. We will be part of that journey. And Gujarat started everything.
Brilliantly said. We have 40 seconds left. But I'd just like to throw to Barry your final word when it comes to climate leadership and your final key message from our discussion here, just in 30 seconds, please.
Well, look, I came to Gujarat first in 2002, just after the earthquake. And I met the then Chief Minister, Keshubhai Patel. I think I brought with me a cheque for £1 million for reconstruction of the earthquake. It was impossible to envisage the transformation that the past 21 years has seen. But it has come about from political vision. It's come about from the political vision of the man who then became the Chief Minister here, Narendra Modi, who had the first Minister for Climate Change in any state in India, and he's gone on to project that now not only at a national level, but on the world stage.
Very well said. Very well said. You have given us so much to think about. We cannot thank you enough for being with us here today in the first dialogue series of the year, of course, as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our panel, His Excellency, and for Barry there, the Honourable Barry Gardner. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you so much as we move on.
Well done.
Thank you so
Next
much.
time, time's up, should be green.
Oh, it should be green. Oh, I do apologise. 10 seconds over wasn't too bad, was it? Of Gujarat. Let's give him a very warm welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, our third conversation of the afternoon here. Sir, Gujarat has been regarded, as we mentioned in our previous conversation, very much as a leader in climate action amongst the Indian states for actually many years now. And it's actually quite amazing what's happened here, especially since 2013, when I think it was Ahmedabad actually became the first city in South Asia with a first heat action plan to address deadly heat waves and air pollution, and it's also become the 6th city in India to join the C40, which of course is the collection of nearly 100 global cities, which is phenomenal. So I wanted to talk about some of the sort of key elements that are happening here, the key elements of work that you have been working on here at the moment.
In fact, as all of you would be knowing, the state government of Gujarat came up with an exclusive dedicated department of climate change way back on 17 September 2009, thanks to the visionary initiative of the then Honorable Chief Minister and currently Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. Some of our eminent speakers have already talked about this climate change department. Otherwise, what you get to see is normally environment, forest, and climate change, they are clubbed together. But here, in the state government of Gujarat, we have a dedicated climate change department. This thing actually dawned upon the people of Gujarat quite on time. Normally, you know, like with climate change, we used to think of it as a distant prospect, which perhaps would be seeing the light of the day, 100 years from now or 200 years from now. But over a period of time, you would have seen that the manifestations of climate change are becoming very stark, and what perhaps we were expecting not to see in our lifetime, we are getting to see now. So way back in 2009, we set up an exclusive department of climate change. And this climate change department, of all the things, thought it imperative to onboard all the people actually. In fact, the recent manifestation of the global launch of Mission Lifestyle for the Environment on 20th October 2022 at Ekta Nagar, Statue of Unity by Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in the presence of United Nations Secretary General, talks about onboarding people, and so that they can adopt a lifestyle which would be, in a manner of speaking, it would be consistent with environment. It would help support and preserve the environment. So an essential feature is that in the state of Gujarat, we want to take everybody along. We want to heighten the general awareness, sensitize the people. So that is how, even in our classrooms, insofar as schools are concerned or higher education institutes are concerned, we are in the process of introducing climate change as, you know, a part of the curricula. And teachers' training is also being imparted so that our teachers in turn could, you know, train the students, and the students could take forward this message of addressing various concerns of climate change in a big way. Things like when you talk about renewables, perhaps you would be knowing that the total installed capacity of renewables in the state of Gujarat is close to 19 gigawatt. It is 18,500 megawatt plus, and that would mean it accounts for about 45% of the installed capacity of power generation in the state. Perhaps you would be knowing that during COP26 in November 2021, Honorable Prime Minister talked about 5 components, and one of them was that India would be attaining 500 gigawatt in renewables by 2030 and would be meeting 50% of its energy requirements by 2030, and of course net zero by 2070. Then we talked about reduction in carbon emission, and also talked about reduction in carbon emission intensity in terms of GDP. So in the state of Gujarat, we have taken these initiatives literally to each and every household. You would be very happy to know that more than 400,000 households have been equipped with solar rooftop. So we have got a very good policy. we subsidize the installation of solar rooftop, and up to 3 kilowatt hour, if I can indulge in a little bit of figures, we give 40% of the benchmark price or discovered price by way of subsidy. And from 3 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt, we give 20%. This has elicited a very warm response, and in the entire country, the state of Gujarat happens to be a front runner insofar as the installation of solar rooftop is concerned. When you talk about the installed capacity of solar energy, again it is something like very close to 9,000 megawatt. Wind energy would be almost nearing 10 gigawatt. Then we have waste to energy, biomass thing, and hybrid also. All these add up to 19 gigawatt. For three-wheelers also. Of late, our Ports and Transport Department has come up with a policy in which we are giving subsidy for four-wheelers as well. So again, on the front of e-mobility, popularization of e-vehicles, we have taken an initiative, and this initiative has sort of percolated to the grassroots level at the cutting edge also, like people are enjoying the fruits of these policies. Then we have things like setting up of institutional biogas plants. We have installation of LEDs, then star-rated fans. So all these schemes have been taken to every nook and corner of the state. So the Department of Climate Change, since it happens to be exclusively devoted to the cause of addressing the concerns of climate change, is ensuring that all these schemes percolate, far and wide. And we are, of course, collaborating with multilateral agencies also. We have had good collaboration with the European Union, then ICLE, South Asia, UNICEF, and we are open to collaborating with all because we would like to share our best practices, and we would also like to learn from others insofar as adoption of good technology is concerned. And these things are becoming more and more, viable also commercially. Initially, like we would be taking recourse to instruments like a renewable purchase obligation, but as has been rightly pointed out by one of the eminent speakers, that now the discovered price insofar as solar energy is concerned, it has come down as low as less than, 2 rupee. And you would know what 2 rupee would be, like, $1 US would be something like 80 rupees. So it's become so cheap, so affordable, and we are also coming up with energy storage solutions, battery storage solutions. So on all fronts, starting from heightening of general awareness, sensitization of people, to funding research, to onboarding all the people, we have, in a manner of speaking, we have made a humble contribution, and it's a very good beginning, which was initiated under the visionary initiative of our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, who used to be the Honorable CM at that point of time, and we have inherited a very rich legacy. All set and geared up to addressing the concerns of climate change.
Very, very well said. Some incredible figures there, and truly wonderful to hear that so much is being done here as well. I just wanted to hone in into solar power in particular across India, which of course is really becoming, as you mentioned, a hugely fast developing industry, a very hot commodity. Gujarat is also, I've been reading, host to India's first solar-powered village. Is that right? Talk us through that sort of journey as well, and what lies ahead in terms of some of the lessons that you're hoping to
A very good example for the rest of the state and the country, and others perhaps may follow suit. So we are at it, trying to make it more and more comprehensive in the days and years to come.
Really is an incredible example of what really can be achieved, especially in such little time as well. Just in the last minute, while we wrap up, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about some of the sort of forward-looking
by aligning our priorities with those of the national government. So essentially that would mean that we are governed by the intentionally nationally determined contributions which have been propagated by the country. Initially, as you may recall, it was October 2, 2015, just prior to the Paris Agreement COP21, when India came up with its intentionally nationally determined contributions, and recently we have revisited them. So, and then Panchamrut. So bearing those in mind, we have some good target for the renewables for year 2030, and aligning ourselves with those targets like By one estimate, we are planning to have something like 72 gigawatt by 2030, but those numbers are being fine-tuned, and 50% of our energy requirements would be met out of renewables. And you would be very happy to learn that even as on date, in terms of installed capacity, we have already attained 45% vis-a-vis of the total energy basket. Then, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
And then cutting down on carbon emissions. And we would like to popularize life in a big way. We would like to take it forward in a big way. Because any mammoth, colossal task, like addressing the concerns of climate change, it cannot be accomplished in entirety unless and until you enlist the participation of each and every citizen. So that, to my mind, is the bottom line, and the message propagated by Honorable Prime Minister while he was globally launching it on 20th October 2022 would be translated into action with all sincerity, and our best possible endeavor would be to make sure that Mission Life gets propagated in a big way throughout the globe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliantly said. We cannot thank you enough, S.J. Hedder, for being with us here today. And thank you so much for getting us up to speed of exactly what's happening over at the Department of Climate Change here for the government of Gujarat. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for S.J. Hedder there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
to have you here. By 2030, as we've just heard. So to tell us more about some of the important work that India has been doing in the climate space, let's continue the conversation. I would now like to call on stage Samir Sinha, who is the chairman of India Green Building Council. A very warm welcome to Samir. Wonderful to have you here. So as you, of course, have heard, we've been talking about some of the best strategies towards net zero, the role of governments, of course, as well. However, we can't continue the conversation without talking about technology, of course. Technology is the major sort of piece in the puzzle, wouldn't you say? So I wanted to take a look at how sort of governments and institutions can tap into this huge potential of technologies and what technology can bring to the table as well. So let's start off with your vision for the future report that was published in June last year. Maybe you could walk us through that a little bit, some of the key highlights and also how that's progressing.
So this was a very interesting project that we did, which came out of a chance encounter that we had with the Danish delegation at the Vibrant Gujarat Summit several years ago, almost 10 years ago. And this resulted in a joint project that we did with DI, Danish Confederation of Industries, and IGBC. And this is what I really admire about what my friend Ambassador Swain said, is they really know green, they are able to lead green, but I disagree that we don't know green. And I think what we are good at is we learn from the best, and which is what we did. So we collaborated with them, and there was a very interesting study that was done to look at the green building, the impact of green buildings on the occupants of these buildings. And this was a survey that was done over the last 3 years, over almost dozens of buildings across typologies, from factories to office buildings to residential buildings. And we were looking at what is it that the occupants feel and how is it different from what happens in a regular building. And which is, I'm very happy to state that the survey has been published last year, which was launched by Ambassador Swain. And we are now carrying this project forward for the next 4 years. What we discovered was people are extremely happy working in a green environment. They are far more productive. They are healthier. There's a lower number of sick days. There is, they go back home happier. There is increased productivity. The company establishes its reputation in the market, which is better than other companies, just by being sustainable. The challenge that I face every day, which is something that we were discussing just this morning, is it expensive to be sustainable? And we've been shouting from the rooftops that it's not only not expensive, it's actually cheaper to be sustainable. It would be stupid not to be sustainable. And that is what we're now trying to do in the second phase of the study, where we're trying to quantify these qualitative advantages of being sustainable into numbers. We have been able to do that with energy, with water, with some amount of the tangibles, where we're able to say that green buildings are probably 30% cheaper in terms of air conditioning. We have numbers that I can certify from my own experience, where we say that air-conditioned buildings in a green building setup almost saves you 5 to 6 rupees a square feet, which is almost 10% of the rental cost. But what is the value of the increased productivity? What is the value of the person going back home happier after spending 8 days in that environment, 8 hours or 10 hours in the environment? And we are now working on that project where we are able to quantify this, hopefully come out with a number saying this is what the impact, dollar impact of that sustainable environment is on the occupant.
And I suppose it's cheaper long term, but is it cheaper necessarily short term?
Yes.
It is?
Yes. It's cheaper to build, it's cheaper to operate, it's cheaper to work within that environment, it's far more productive for the company to be in that environment. There's no question about it. And it's a mindset. What are we comparing it to? Cheaper compared to what? That's the key question, right? What are you comparing it to? And if it is a high-performance building, today, I think 15 years ago, since I've been involved in this movement, it was a whole different scenario. Today, it is difficult to find non-green products in the market. Would you imagine being in a company which sells or produces non-green or non-responsible to the environment, and would consumer buy that? I think there's no brainer, right? So you have to be sensitive, you have to be environmentally conscious if you want to do business today, in today's environment. The big difference that I see is that the problem is us. The solution is the next generation. And I feel they have they're far more conscious, they're far more responsible than we have been in our lifetimes. At least I have been in my lifetime, you are way younger. Than the next generation is, because they are really, really committed to a far more sustainable, environment-friendly, and more responsible way of living than we have been.
And at the end of the day, we can start educating them now and giving them the right information.
They're already educated.
As well.
They're more educated than we are.
Also, some may say that the technology is already there. People can make the change if they want. So what is stopping people? You talked about a mindset. But
awareness.
Is there anything else?
Economics. People don't know that it's cheaper to build this. And that is exactly the study and the awareness that we need to build. That is where this platform and platforms like this will help, is because we really want to educate people. I want to see one study that says sustainable development is expensive. Why are people talking about it? Who's saying it is expensive? Where is the report? I have several that I can present which says it is cheaper. So it's just a mindset, I think. It's just an awareness issue.
What about investments? Let's talk about some of the sort of policy demands around that and challenges for major investments within that sector.
I think that is the biggest opportunity that we have. If you look at, from my own personal example, I can tell you there's developments happening. We have a large development they're building in Gift City, for example, which is a very dynamic, forward-looking, progressive project happening right here in Gujarat. Totally sustainable. All buildings have to be certified green. It's a mandated green city. We have 500,000 square feet building that we built, and we have leased it out to Bank of America. The only reason Bank of America came to us was because this was a LEED certified green building, or else we would have not got this client. There it is. There's the proof in the pudding, right? It's out there. It's for people to go out and get that market. The reason I believe that all the development that will happen in this country, at least the large development, will be green is because the funding that is coming to this country is mandated green. There is a mandate that all the foreign fund that is coming into this country, I would say about 80 to 90% of it is already mandated green. So if you want to do something, also start looking at the corporates. Every corporate annual report, if you look at today, whether it is the Tatas, the Mahindras, Godrej, any large developer in the country, they are talking about ESG. Their financials probably occupy the last few pages of the report. The first 10 pages of the report will talking about the environment story. It's talking about what is their commitment to the environment, what is their commitment to ESG. So if that is what you're headed towards, how can you run away from sustainable development.
Tell us about the sort of innovation opportunities across the country then. I mean, there have been announcements such as I mentioned earlier, that Ahmedabad, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, by the way, which I didn't know, most recently joined the C40 cities, joining 100 cities to make a difference, basically, and to implement the same type of policies as well. Tell us about the innovation opportunities off the back of an announcement like that, then.
Cities is where the GDP of the country exists. The population lives in the cities. We are the ones who are the biggest problem creators, also the biggest opportunity for solutions. So I believe the policies that will be framed for the cities, for urban development in the coming years, will really change the way we live. I think India is extremely progressive in terms of the government's policies towards the environment. Gujarat obviously leads, like Haider Sahab was saying. I've interacted with Talati Sahab, and some of the vision that the climate change department has is incredible. We are one of the few states in the country which have developments, like I was saying, about like Dholera and GIFT, which are entirely mandated green cities. These are the kind of examples that we need to replicate, where there is district cooling, there is centralized waste management system, there is a world-class infrastructure in place. If you have that kind of infrastructure, it becomes absolutely seamless for you to be sustainable. There is nothing really you can do non-sustainable in that kind of environment. So that is the way the future of the cities of this country must develop. We have a huge responsibility because as a government, India is probably the largest developer in the world. As a country, we are probably the largest developer in the world. We are making more buildings than any other country in the world is. So we will have to be more responsible, and so I have immense faith in the vision that the Prime Minister has for the country. And but nothing will happen, I totally agree, unless the citizens get involved. And mission life, and needs like that has to nudge the citizens towards sustainable living. Building is only one part of the problem. Actually, it's not the biggest problem. Sustainable living, which is what our ethos was, which is what our culture is, we need to go back to that.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to stop you there because we have another special guest that's going to join our conversation, if you don't mind. And for our next conversation here at the World Climate Institute Dialogue series, we're going to focus again on the state of Gujarat with our next guest. It is a great pleasure to welcome him to the stage. Please give a very warm welcome to the President of the Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Pathik Patwari. Thank you so much for joining us, for being with us here today. Time out of everyone's busy schedules, by the way. A jam-packed agenda, of course, as well. Let's start off with SMEs and startups, which I think should really be at the forefront of discussion. Let's talk about some of the schemes for assistance within industries here in the state, and some of maybe the success stories to date as well within the climate agenda as well.
To start with, I would like to first say that India, like what Samir said, India is a country that has worshipped sun, that has worshipped earth, that has worshipped water. So we are much before the world was eyeing sustainability. Right? So I think India doesn't need any preachings, any teachings. We are there, it's just that we need to reassign, remodule the way we are working. We should not forget that we are the manufacturing hub today of the world. So if a country is doing good elsewhere, it's because India is producing it for them. But we don't run away from our responsibilities, though. So coming back with what you said, Gujarat, like you always want your best player to be on the field for the longest time. And for India, Gujarat has been the role model state. Any policies that have been implemented pan-India have been first introduced to Gujarat. They have been molded, nurtured, and then taken further up to the country. Likewise, it's with the solar policy, just one of the examples. And Mr. Heather is here, so he has been with this policy since inception. They started with a public-private partnership on implementing solar panels or solar installations of small 5 megawatts on the government buildings, that too in the capital of Gujarat. Successful, that was then further extended to the other cities of Gujarat. And it's now become one of the most successful model of solar roof installations pan-India, and with one of, like Sir said, that it's one of the having highest densities of solar installations. And that happened purely because there was participation from the government, from the private and the individual funds. Foreign supports like the country from Netherlands, and it was more of a cumulative approach because of which it became popular. And India or in Gujarat, I think the way forward is going to be the public-private partnerships when you would like to address such kind of issues.
That was my next question, actually. What is your outlook when it comes to those types of opportunities, when it comes to government mobilizing finance towards PPPs?
So when you talk about India, we call it Atmanirbharta. It's like self-reliance. And for Gujarat, we have our policies, Atmanirbhar policies, which says that when a project in renewable comes up, it requires a lot of capex. And to meet this capex, the government finances the interest, takes care of the interest burden on your capital investments. They also take care of funding the expenses towards procuring land, like the stamp duties and the various legal expenses that goes through of buying a land. So government has been there, has been handholding the industries, and they are trying to work on a bottom-up theory, because Gujarat being predominantly MSME state, it becomes even more tougher for the government to reach each of them. But the policies are well defined, and the way they manage funds for the SMEs so that they could implement the green energy causes, they could address the possibilities of reducing the carbon footprints is going very good.
That's very good to hear. Well, the GCCI last year signed a whole host of MOUs, I've been reading, with the Climate Change Department and the GOG to go green, to reduce carbon footprint and achieve net zero. That's everyone's mission at the moment, of course, isn't it, by 2070. Tell us more about some of the different significant signings that have happened in most recent sort of months, and those significant, and the significance of those going forward as well.
Sure. Like the Honorable Prime Minister said, and all of the speakers have addressed it, mission life, that is lifestyle for the environment. And it will be only possible if every strata of the people, community come together and address it. Industry bit though different then. And what this is doing is they are more empowering the industries in many ways. We are reducing on the waste generations also. At the same time, many ecosystems that were working around the waste generations have been now given more importance. We are speaking more about the policies that are going to be more friendly for the industries to reduce the waste.
And what about the impact of these signings on the startup sector in particular as well? Maybe you can chip in as well, Samir, but after you, please.
Sure. So in continuation with the agreements and various signs we have done with the IHub incubation centers, one of them was holding the startups to come out with initiatives or models or products that could be environment friendly. And for that we needed all the ecosystem parameters to be on the same platform, whether it was a startup, whether it was industry, whether it was government or an investor. If all of these together, they come up on the same platform, try to address each other's need, and we could come up with a model that would be more friendly for the industry to adapt it, at the same time without disturbing the price economics and giving out the deliverables equally. So it is basically the handholding the startups, encouraging them to support the industries. So industry should come out with their problem statements so that startups can start working on it. And this thing has to happen in tandem. So what we thought that we should handhold startups here. In fact, I would be happy to share that Gujarat Chamber of Commerce happened to be the first chamber in India which started inviting startups in their board meetings, and each board meeting would have 3 startups presenting their products. So on the very first day, they would have an exposure of elite community in businessmen who would be very ready to handhold them, mentor them, maybe invest in their products. So that's how it all started. I think we're happy that today we are getting quite amount of traction on that policy.
So important to have that type of dialogue as well, isn't it? Samir, your thoughts?
I think there are wonderful opportunities in this whole domain for startups. Energy is something which is very, very key because it's expensive and it's a huge opportunity to save energy and come up with and digital technology will really help. One area which I feel is still a humongous opportunity, but we are not really looking at it, is water. Because in India, we still consider water and air to be free. And I feel that is going to be our biggest challenge in the coming years. And we really need to look at that. And there is a lot of technology intervention that can be done in that domain. And I would love to see more innovation happening in the domain of water. The other opportunity that I see happening is this whole area of green knowledge. Consulting, sustainable development, sustainable consulting. And that is where I would love to interact with other countries and learn from what they have done and how we can bring that platform, whether it is technology, whether it is just knowledge sharing, whether it is consulting for certification, for studies, for research. I think those are amazing opportunities ahead of us, and we must look at those.
That's the only way to grow, though, isn't it? To learn from each other, of course.
Sure.
I wanted to touch very, very quickly in the last 2 minutes on technology and industry and what sort of direction that's going here in the States and also in India across the board. And the role of AI in that as well. And what are you sort of forecasting for industry in particular, how that's going to change over the next couple of years?
Like we said that India is going to be the world's producer. We have been replacing many other countries now. And this cannot happen without being very sensitive towards the environment. The industry today understands that. But at the same time, we have to understand that India has predominantly more SMEs. And they give more employment rather than the large sectors. So to guide a small and medium enterprise is even more difficult. So what is currently happening is that a lot of small policies which governments are coming up are more focused towards SMEs. That's what I earlier said, it's going bottom up. And once you have your pyramid base stronger, you can build on these technologies and it can percolate more further. With AI being a tool which is now very well implemented, it's no more a technology that becomes very expensive, so it's getting adopted by the industry, very welcoming to do that. And with that, there has been more easier for the government to implement the laws. At the same time, industry has gone very positive. They understand their responsibility, and they know that it's not only mandatory legally to take care of the environment, but it is their moral responsibility. So what Samir previously told, that it's within our ethos, somewhere we've misaligned some time back, but we are again back. We understand that we'll have to use all the technologies that are available, we'll have to implement it. They would come at a cost, but yes, that cost will be supported by the government. And with that together, so it will be a democratic way of approaching this problem, taking this problem as an opportunity. I mean, climate change is now a climate opportunity if we see in the other way. And if everyone, government, industry, and industry body like us comes together, I'm sure that we'll see a greener world tomorrow.
Collaboration really is key.
Yeah.
We cannot thank you enough for your expert insights there. Sadly, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Fantastic dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Brilliant conversations we're having here today. And we now move on, ladies. And get to the bullet points of all our conversations all together in one. Well, as we've heard, we've covered the role of governments, the huge potential of technology in the fight against climate change, and we've learned from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry about what is happening firsthand here in the state of Gujarat. However, of course, we cannot continue conversations without talking about the private sector. However, before we do that, I'd like to introduce you all to our virtual speaker. He's joining us virtually now. Please give a very warm welcome to His Excellency Dr. Kande Yumkela. He's the former UN Under-Secretary General, Special Representative for Sustainable Energy for All, Chairman of UN Energy, and two-term Director General of the UN Industrial Development Organization. A very warm welcome to His Excellency. Hoping we can hear you, though. We don't have any sound at the moment. Are you on mute at all, or is it maybe a problem our end? Do you want to...
Can you hear me now? Thank you for having me on your show.
Maybe we can just turn him up a little bit, and then we can get started.
Can you hear
really
me?
Fantastic. We cannot thank you enough for joining us. It really is a great pleasure. Sound is working now. You just like to say a few words. Let's see if your sound is working. Well, anyway, we've had some great discussions here. I don't know whether you've joined us for the morning. Can you hear us now? Can you hear us? You can't hear me. That's the problem. Any tech magicians over there that would like to help us out?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me? Oh, wonderful. Okay, so we just need to get the volume turned up for His Excellency, and hopefully we can get started. But in the meantime, maybe you could just have a think about our first question. As I wanted to look further afield to Africa, we very much focused on India, of course. So I just wanted to talk about the impacts of the fuel crisis right now on the developing economies over in Africa, and what that's been like in terms of pushing different strategies towards a greener economy. Maybe you can sum that up for us. If we can't hear you, maybe just give it a couple of minutes thought, and hopefully we'll be able to get your volume up.
I heard you. Are you ready?
Let's see how we get on.
Can you hear me now?
But yes, as I mentioned, we've been talking this morning. I don't know whether you managed to tune in online. As I mentioned, we are, of course, being live streamed as well, which is rather fantastic. And we've been talking about how international geopolitics as well, and energy dependence, of course, is influencing the transition towards a green economy. We've had updates from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, from the state here. And yeah, we focused on SMEs, and it's been a great dialogue so far. And I'm hoping we can continue our dialogue. Otherwise, I'm thinking maybe we bring up our next speaker up on the stage just to continue the conversation, and I'm hoping we can get your sound back at some point. Let's see how our tech team are doing. But otherwise, yes, I think we might pull up our next guest, if our next guests are here, of course. So probably, Your Excellency, please do just give us a couple of moments. We're desperately trying to get your sound back. And, of course, we would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this, now that we have you here.
Can you hear me now?
Well, I can hear you in the distance, but it's not relaying to our audience, sadly. But yes, in the meantime, Your Excellency, we're going to get back to you in just a couple of moments. Please do stay on the line with us. I really do apologize. We will get you up and running, and we are going to get that sound back ASAP. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to turn our attention to the private sector and empowering innovation. I spoke about the private sector. Of course, we cannot continue conversations without the private sector. And our next set of speakers are all seasoned entrepreneurs. So I'd like to very much welcome to the stage Sumit Popley. He's the co-founder and Chief Sustainability Officer of Acacia. A very warm welcome. And our next guest is Kunal Prasad, who is the co-founder and COO of Cropin. A very warm welcome. Mr. Kunal Prasad from Cropin. He's the co-founder and the COO of Cropin. Mr. Kunal Prasad.
Kunal's me here. I'm already there.
Sorry. One moment. Dear me. Sorry. So hang on a sec. Who else do we need? We need one more. Rudra Dalmia. I do apologize. There we go. To join the conversation, I'd now like to welcome on stage Rudra Dalmia, the co-managing partner of Green Frontier Capital. I do apologize. Too much going on at the moment. Too much juggling. But how fantastic to have such an incredible lineup here to talk about the private sector, a very important topic, of course, as well. Now, Sumit, I was reading that real estate and infrastructure contribute to 44% of global CO2 emissions.
Yes.
Which is shocking. And, you know, it's expected to cost the world's financial sector $24.2 trillion US as well, an intense figure there. So, Acacia, let's talk about what's happening over there and how you're tackling climate change and what you're doing to improve in solutions when it comes to carbon footprint.
So at Acacia is an early stage startup right now, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to integrate the entire ecosystem for the real estate sector, bring it together, help the sector estimate its emissions. Like you said, more than 40% of global emissions comes from the real estate sector. Part of it is embodied in the buildings that we use. Part of it is from the operations of the buildings. What we're trying to build is a platform for individuals, individual asset owners, individual developers to understand their individual emissions from the assets that they own. And then we are also looking at recommending decarbonization strategies based on their emissions. And that's where we come in. Essentially, there is a lot of science which is available. There's a lot of science which is still getting developed. We're trying to bring everything together in a single platform and enable everyone to be able to estimate what they need to and take action on their assets.
Brilliant. Moving over to Kunal, I do apologise for that introduction earlier. You're the co-founder and COO of Cropin, and I've been reading some really incredible figures here as well. You've partnered with over 250 organisations globally to digitise 16 million acres of farmland, and you've helped nearly 7 million farmers as well, which is utterly incredible. Tell us a little bit about that innovation journey so far to date and some of the challenges and successes that have come out of it so far.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, like agriculture, we all know right now, it is the biggest industry in the world. It covers almost 540 million farmers which are engaged in that, feeding almost 9 billion people. And we cannot afford to make this industry inefficient. Back in 2010, when we started, this was a clear vision that we have to increase the per acre value and make every single stakeholder efficient and profitable with agriculture. And we have seen the statistics, like now in developing countries, the productivities are 40%, 50% of the developed countries. We are seeing losses at the farm level, like now in the production losses, pests and diseases are like basically they're spoiling the crops by 20 to 30%. From developing countries where the supply chain is actually reducing the losses by 20, 30% as well. Like, so if you see 50% of the crop or the potential is getting lost at the production level or the supply chain level altogether, which means there's a huge inefficiency and there's a cost of producing there. And that was a fundamental reason that we thought that, how can we really solve this particular problem? And that is where we innovated that digital and technology and real-time integration to the grassroots level is the only way possible to doing that. With that as a vision, we built technology. It was a learning curve altogether. Innovation as we kept on learning in the industry, from digital agriculture to innovating how do you basically bring right technology for the farmers, how can they adopt that, build partnerships. Then you innovate in terms of challenges in climate change, because 5-6 years back, this was not the biggest problem. There were other problems of digital agriculture, but the challenges now came in terms of climate change, and we started solving that. Then the recent problems is all about how do you make it much more regenerative agriculture, looking at the overall ecosystem and things like that. And that is where the pace of challenges that the agriculture is facing is getting increased, and that means that we have to solve that in that particular manner as well. And that's where digital and technology is coming into play. We are bringing up full stack technology solutions, helping farmers, industries which are either lending, insuring, doing farm production, seed production, or even the government and development sector, to help them to engage with the stakeholders better. We partner with large programs like, in fact, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which is one of the largest innovative programs globally. Now they're moving the entire stack from more of the rudimentary methods into using machine learning and AI and satellite technologies to do real-time settlements of the claims of the farmers and things around that. So it has been a great journey. The learnings are always there in this particular industry, and I'm sure it will keep coming up, but we are geared up to solve this problem at that scale. Happy to also share that now we have reached to close to 1.5% of the global farmers right now, and our vision is to reach to 10% and make everyone sustainable.
It really is phenomenal what you're doing at the moment. It really is, and thank you for being with us. Over to Rudra. Let's talk a little bit about the future of green investment and energy transition in developing nations. Tell us a little bit more about the risks and challenges from an investor perspective?
So we're a venture capital, early stage venture capital investor that's supporting companies across the value chain, across separate industries, starting very early. Identifying innovation is not difficult in India. There's amazing entrepreneurs here, as you can see on stage. We found incredible companies to invest in, but we see massive challenges in the scale-up stage that's coming up ahead. There are no cheaper sources of capital, and if our venture capital money is not supported at the scale-up stage with cheaper bonds or ability to help these companies scale up, just like infrastructure was built. The green revolution is not going to be short. It's going to be long. It needs patience. It needs cheaper sources of capital, which comes typically from governments. And I see the government of India stepping up a lot in the green hydrogen mission, etc. But we are really, really worried about the next 2 years, where we are obviously staring at a difficult times in the global economy. And I feel that with the policies that the government of India has come out with, we need to figure out ways to attract better capital in the old school industries to make it a revolution. Industries like steel, where there's so much green steel potential in India, which attracting good quality scrap to India to try and do that. We already make the world's best green cement, because we use fly ash in India already. 85% of India's cement is the greenest cement in the world, and that's fly ash is a waste product of energy plants. There's amazing opportunities to come up with financing companies that will build out and support the EV revolution. And one thing that's very important is the governments need to try and coordinate aggregating demand, where they need to, like for example, if they're placing a fleet of orders for Ahmedabad city, the same tender should be aggregated for other states and try to, because you get the ability to get cheaper, you negotiate better, and also help all the states identify the right way to do things. And Gujarat, being a leader, has been doing this for a long time, but I hope other states learn from them. So policy is very, very important. Ability to attract cheaper sources of capital. And the biggest challenge is, how do we reduce the cost of hedging for the dollar that comes in? Because when you add the cost of hedging, green financing becomes unaffordable. So it's really the biggest problem for us.
Very quickly, what are your thoughts on this breakthrough announcement that was made in COP27 over in Sharm el-Sheikh, establishing a loss and damage fund? Don't you think that's going to change?
I don't think countries cooperate very well. These are very good talk shops. They never come together. Have you heard anything about this since then? Has Pakistan got a dime for I think 40 million people suffering? Nothing.
Well, maybe we could get some commentary from Barry a little later on that. But yeah, interesting you say that. Right, let's move on back over to Acacia. How has technology, do you think, been instrumental in helping businesses calculate risk when it comes to economic, environmental wellness?
So I think, there's a lot of technology out there which is available. You see what Cropin is doing. You see what some of the other startups are doing right now, bringing together the best of everything that's available. And that's really, enabling a platform for everyone to come together. And that's enabled people who've not had access, get access to the right sort of knowledge and right sort of resources to develop, to improve, and to implement better strategies. That's where technology comes in. And also as an integrator platform such as ourselves, we are able to bring together everyone in the entire value chain at a common ground and offer a solution which wasn't even heard of until a few years ago. So that's where technology really does it. And when you look at the real estate sector, the built environment sector, from manufacturers to developers to the asset owners to even investment funds who are investing, they can all benefit from what we're trying to do and what we're trying to offer as a solution to the sector. So it's not just the sector, it's even beyond the sector, and the entire value chain that benefits from technology right now.
And what has the climate been like in terms of getting this type of technology off the ground and innovation as well? How have you found that?
I think technology has developed by leaps and bounds in the last 10 years. I think everyone will agree. And what technology has enabled is for larger platforms to create more scalable solutions, to provide more rapidly deployable solutions across the world. I mean, if I'm developing something in India, I can deploy this in the US in a matter of a few clicks. And that is where technology really supports and technology really helps. What we're currently lacking right now in the real estate sector is for manufacturers and producers to come up with a genuine number of what the emissions are for every product that we are developing. If you look at numbers, cement and concrete production has contributed to more than 7% of global emissions historically. And that's a surprising number when you look at it for somebody who doesn't know construction. About 13% of global emissions are coming from the built environment, which is embodied in the buildings that we sit in. And those numbers have to be brought down in the future. And that is where the manufacturers need to take responsibility for what they're producing, how they're producing, and are they being fair, and are they being clear in their environmental product declarations. And that is, once the declarations come in, that is where the reduction and the opportunities for improvement lie. That's where the major shortfall is in our industry right now, that manufacturers are not able to give a fair and a correct estimation of what their emissions are, which I think which is something which we are also trying to build onto our platform. We're inviting manufacturers to declare how much emissions they have, so that can be utilized on our platform by the users of those products in estimating the emissions in the entire life cycle of a project, of a construction, of a building construction or infrastructure construction.
Over to Kunal. Now, as India is fairly new to digitalization, what have been the main challenges in those initial years for you when it comes to digitalization as well, and actually rolling it out?
Yeah, I think the initial years, when I talk about 2010, I think the basic problem was that you really wanted to connect at the grassroots level, but the technology and the infrastructure was not there. The mobile phones, the smartphones, which will be the medium for you to connect to the farmers and exchange information, was not there. Telecom networks were not available, which means that we could reach a certain percentage of the mass that you would like to empower. So these were some of the fundamental challenges. Then when we went to the business side, they were also uncertain about whether digital technology, machine learning, and AI, this was new in the industry as well. Agriculture is it is one of the laggards in terms of innovation in that particular manner, but now agriculture has understood that technology, digitization, and these newer innovative solutions can be really adding a lot of value. So I think in the last 10 years when we started, it was at ground zero, but now it is one of the fastest industry in terms of adoption of technology. So I think that is something that the industry has learned. We have seen the impact of technology. So institutions like banks, insurance, farming institutions which have, or even the government which have adopted technology, have seen a real drastic improvement, in terms of improvement in productivity for the smallholder farmers, reduction in risk because of pest and disease, better supply chain management of reducing the losses that is happening in the supply chain by better making the awareness about what's going to happen. For example, in Nigeria, we processed the entire country and said this time this much, the area is less in terms of production and the quantity is going to be less, which means there is a food security challenge that is there. So now the governments and policymakers are even much more informed about what's going to happen. So I think the transformation has happened from those challenging times to right now, where I think it's a right environment for innovation. And I'm really glad to share that I think the pace of innovation that's happening, the number of startups which are coming, combining the strengths together with partnerships, I think we are all geared up to solve this big problem.
Rudra, back over to you. Tell us a little bit about the financing opportunities and policy incentives for green delivery pathways here in India, and also some of the opportunities that there is for government to mobilize finance for the private sector as well, and for PPPs.
So on the policy side, I think the government of India is doing a fantastic job, at the state levels as well as at the center, where the government has influence at the state. We have seen the Green Hydrogen Mission is a great example, possibly the most forward-thinking and largest layout of capital that's been done for this. It's very well thought through, so I encourage people to read about it. On the policy side, I think the biggest challenge that we are facing is how do we measure impact? And it's a massive, and you spoke about this. There's even at the primary level, it's very difficult to measure impact. People are talking about the ESG side, and somebody mentioned from the Gujarat Chamber of Commerce that most of the annual reports are talking about 5, 10, 20 pages dedicated to ESG in their annual reports, but it's not, there's no real measurement framework out there. If the government doesn't, if you can't measure it, you can't, change it. And that's one big area that I feel the government is, and I know they're working towards it. It's very, very complex. The world hasn't solved it. But I think India needs to come out with its own standards, not follow the West on this. In areas like agriculture, for example, what Cropin is doing is incredible. Just imagine the carbon impact of sequestration that change in cropping patterns do. Nobody's talking, you have some very, very few people who are trying to evangelize this, like Sadhguru, etc. But nobody's really talking about the power of carbon sequestration using change in agriculture practices. So the right incentives can only be created if the right measurement is happening for the farmers. And digital platforms like theirs are companies like what we want to back from our venture fund. But we really need policy to come through and help clarify how do we measure as investors, because we are raising money from outside India and within India, and our LPs will ask us, where is your impact? How are you measuring it? So we do try and make an effort with all our companies, but it's still not clear how they're going to do it. On the energy financing side, I think there's few and far between. Lots of things have been done, but it's still the green hydrogen mission is the best sort of example that I've seen so far. I haven't seen any other, whether it's on solar. Yes, the public-private partnerships have done well, but let's hope the green hydrogen mission succeeds. It's going to be revolutionary.
So is this what the announcement that was made yesterday? Yes. So that tell us more about that. 2 days ago, and it's the new green hydrogen mission to make the country a global green energy hub. Is that a very exciting?
One of the biggest exporters of hydrogen power in the world. I think that's the mission in another 15 years.
Our largest foreign exchange cost and the largest polluter is fossil fuels, right? So we need to find a way to combat that. Green hydrogen is essentially how you electrolyze hydrogen using solar or tidal energy. And it requires a massive effort and huge amounts of capital. I think the government has laid out $3 billion?
Yeah.
Close to $2.5–3 billion straight up. And thankfully they've kept aside money for R&D in that as well, because we've been woefully short of investing in research and development as a country in India, at the corporate level and at the government level. So the fact that they're encouraging that, they understand the problem. India is a difficult country to solve everything, but I think hopefully this is one of the very, very few globally smart initiatives that I've seen.
Yep.
Very exciting. Does anyone else want to sort of add to that?
No, absolutely. We are really excited about these initiatives, because the transport minister, he was talking about his car. He was traveling on a car which was fueled by that. And in the last 6 months, this is what his announcement that has been done. 18,000 crores, up $2.5 billion into that. I think this is one of the first, and we are so proud to hear those news from the government. Very positive.
Very exciting. Right, we just have a couple of minutes, and I'd like all of you to just wrap up some of the key highlights you'd like our audience to go away with, especially when it comes to PPPs and why it's so vital going forward as well. Why is that a key element when it comes to climate change and the initiatives going forward? Just in 1 minute, please.
I think climate change is everyone's responsibility. Tackling climate change is not just a government's responsibility, it is every individual's responsibility. It's like some of the speakers said earlier, it's not mine, it's not yours, it's all of us as a collective. We have to tackle climate change. I can make my little effort, my small effort. Everyone has to make that small effort, and that's how we're going to tackle it.
Yeah, so climate change needs investments. Some statistics say it needs around $3 trillion in terms of investment to make it happen. But the solutions are there. We as innovators, we as implementing partners are there to solve the problems. We know how it could be solved. So it's all about how do you bring this partnership of public-private sectors coming together to solve this bigger problem. And also the pace of innovation can increase even when we have larger investments coming into the play. And we have seen private sectors coming, investment bankers coming and doing that, but even the government, if it can come and back that, it'll be a very positive move for the startups and industry altogether.
Final remarks.
Very specific. We need to reduce the blended cost of capital for our climate entrepreneurs, and that can only happen if the government, and this is where Gift City and hopefully initiatives like the Gift City will help us reduce the blended cost by supplementing our expensive capital. Venture capital is expensive capital. It's people and institutions taking risks with cheaper green bonds that we can attract from outside, from countries like Japan, from Europe, etc., where capital is cheaper. Right now it's expensive because the world is going through a crisis, but where the cost of capital is cheaper. Because of the nature of the rupee relationship with the US dollar, we've always had very high hedging costs. So if I attract capital at 2% or 3% and I have to pay 5% on top of that to manage my US dollar risk, I'm already failing in my initiative to attract cheap capital. So I really hope that the government of India and the government of Gujarat figure out a way to solve this problem. There's amazing initiatives. We've invested in a couple of entrepreneurs in Gujarat. I absolutely love this state, the way they incentivize, and that's one of the best public-private partnership models I've seen in Surat and in Ahmedabad. So, big congratulations to this state.
Very good to hear. We have run out of time, sadly. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, experiences, and knowledge with us here today. It really has truly been fantastic to hear from you. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for our panel there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you all here. Thank you so much once again. Lovely to see you all. Yes, okay. There's some good news apparently. We have our previous speaker back. So let me give him the introduction he deserves once again. A very warm welcome to His Excellency Dr. Kande Yumkela. He is the former UN Under-Secretary General, Special Representative for Sustainable Energy for All, Chairman of UN Energy and two-term Director General of the UN Industrial Development Organization. Your Excellency, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Now I'm hoping the volume can be turned up. We can hear you faintly. Can you hear me okay? How's the line? Is the line good?
I can hear you clearly. Yes, I can hear you well.
You can hear me perfectly. I'm hoping we can get His Excellency's volume just up so that our audience can hear your remarks. Right, as I mentioned, we wanted to look a little bit further afield over to Africa. So I'm hoping you had time to think about that question I asked you about the impact of the fuel crisis on developing economies over in Africa and what that's been like in terms of pushing strategies towards a greener economy as well.
Well, we have to put everything in context. Remember that COVID-19 wreaked quite a bit of havoc on African economies. Even before we had the very first case of COVID-19 in Africa, by March, April in 2020, the economies were already struggling. And one of the heavy hit areas was energy. Investments in energy, according to the International Energy Agency, dropped already by 30%. With the current Russia-Ukraine war, the economic situation has been even worse. We have seen pump prices rise rapidly in many countries. We see food price inflation averaging between 25 to 30% in most countries. We've seen most economies having balance of payment problems and, of course, serious devaluations in their economies. If I take my country as an example, our pump price doubled immediately within 3 months of the Ukraine war. So just think about the impact on the poor. Food price inflation currently in my country is 35 to 40%. General inflation is about 25%. So the impacts have been severe. We're hoping that these shocks, because of our dependence on imported fuels, might incentivize governments to look at renewable energy alternatives that are more localized, that are also more distributed across the country. So we've not seen that move yet because, again, budgets are very tight for most countries. The IMF and the World Bank and the African Development Bank are providing significant budget support to just keep the number of governments in poorer African countries afloat. So the impact has been very severe. Over to you.
So, Hijim, get us up to speed then as well on some of the partnership opportunities when it comes to collaboration over in Africa. Is that gathering any sort of momentum and speed? And do you have maybe some nice examples of environmental democracy success stories as well?
Well, the partnerships are expanding. As I mentioned, the multilateral institutions are partnering with African economies to take advantage of the opportunities in green innovations. There is a significant progress in East Africa. Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda are shining examples of significant bilateral and multilateral investments in green energy resources, geothermal energy, solar, off-grid solutions, mini-grids, and major grid expansion initiatives in East Africa. Similar efforts are being made in the Southern Africa, but West Africa, we're catching up very slowly. There is progress in Senegal, Ghana, and Nigeria, to a certain extent, Cote d'Ivoire. The smaller African countries like mine are really struggling. But overall, let me say that we are very disappointed in Africa because less than 2% of investments in renewable energy investments globally come to Africa, in spite of the fact of the huge solar, wind, and hydro and geothermal opportunities we have in Africa. Most countries have instituted policy reforms, they've created market opportunities, but of course, other risk factors are impeding investments. Some of the shining good examples we have on partnerships with the European Union, for example. In Sharm el-Sheikh, I chaired a session where the EU launched a $2.5 billion green energy partnership with Africa that will leverage about 4 times that amount of additional resources to be invested in green energy and renewable energy initiatives. There's significant support also bilaterally from the United Kingdom, from Germany, from France, to a number of African countries. One of the newer ones we've seen is the interest in green hydrogen in countries like Namibia, in Mauritania, in Northern Africa region. About 6-7 countries that are being supported now by some European partners to venture into green hydrogen as soon as possible.
We are running out of time. We are still having a few technical issues this end as well, but we cannot thank you enough for giving us that update over in Africa. Your Excellency, what a great pleasure it's been to have you here at the World Climate Institute Dialogue. Thank you so much. Lovely to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come full circle. The day is blasted past, hasn't it? It's been a full 90 minutes of dialogue. Now, to wrap up, I'd very much like to invite back on the stage. I've seen him taking notes furiously for the past hour and a half. And he's going to summarize for us, I hope. The Honourable Barry Gardiner, welcome back. Right, let's start off with your key highlights, please.
Gosh.
What are your thoughts? What you've heard?
I've scribbled so much down here, and I've circled lots of things that kept on coming up. Mission Life. How many speakers mentioned Mission Life? The fact that, yes, governments have a job to do here, and we heard very clearly from business when we had the triumvirate at the end, talking about the importance of government helping business get that financing sorted out, getting the right regulatory framework in place. They talked about procurement policy, all of those things, really important. But this Mission Life kept on coming back as we also have to take individual responsibility. We have to understand that this is, yes, it's about transforming the way that we live. And we need urgent transformative change at a global level, but that is not just what government does, and government won't be able to do it unless it has that permission of the public that comes from the public being educated and taking this on themselves. And education was another theme that kept coming back through. Honourable Minister Hedda made that point very clearly about the importance of education for the next generation. Samir said the same when he was talking about it. And he talked about it in terms of young people and then brought it back to Mission Life again. So these were themes that ran through the discussion. I think, you know, lots of people have spoken about the scale and the impact of climate change in the discussion this afternoon. The way in which it undermines not just global security, but countries are facing a huge number of individual risks. We talked about the floods, we talked about the droughts, we talked about all of that. But businesses are suffering huge supply chain disruption. They have a real problem in terms of stranded assets. You invest in a coal-fired power station now, you're struggling. And actually, here in India, we've seen that, haven't we, Minister? Because I think the projection was for 25 gigawatt of capacity to come on stream by 2030. There was 32 gigawatt of capacity that was already going to be in place, put in place back in 2016. But the financing is not coming through from it. Why is it not? Because investors say, hey, you know what? This is a risk. There's a risk that I'm going to be ending up with a stranded asset because in 10, 15 years' time, the policies may have moved so far from government to say, we're no longer doing this. We're off coal now. So there are real structural problems, and what business needs is certainty. You know, business can't operate unless it has clarity about what the framework in which it's going to operate is going to be. And I think that is something that governments need to take on board, and businesses need to increasingly make that clear to governments. We want to know not just what the targets are and the deliverables are in 10, 15 years' time. We want to know in 5 years' time. We want to be able to plan ahead with clarity and then deliver what you tell us. Business will operate in any environment as long as it's clear, structured, and government isn't going to shift the goalposts. One of the other things that came out, I thought, very clearly was when Samir talked about the Green Building Council survey. I thought that was really interesting that, you know, here we're talking about doing something, yeah, we may be doing it because this is going to be good for climate change. But actually, it's good for people's health. Mm-hmm. It lowers your running costs as a business if you build it correctly in the first place as a green building. You don't have the same running costs as a business. But more than that, your people are happier and their productivity goes up. I mean, what's not to like about that?
Exactly.
You know, it really, and that's how, again, we have to look at this holistically. That's where it really does make sense to have it as a green business. Considering water and air, Samir spoke about they've always been regarded as free. Externalities. Externalities are the big bugbear here. Anything that the economist doesn't factor into the baseline, oh, well, you know, we can pollute. That waste is an externality. We don't need to worry about that. No, somebody pays the cost of that. And bringing those externalities into the financial equation, into the business equation, is really critical.
We are running out of time.
I know we are. I know we are. Can I just very quickly pick up a couple of things? Look, I think it was a real shame that we didn't get more from Kunde on the situation in Africa, because I know that the bulk of the loss and damage that has already occurred in the world as a result of climate change is in Africa. They have been the worst affected. And they contribute less than 4% of global emissions. That's their continent. That's not one country. That's their continent.
Wow.
So it's totally unfair. And that's why the discussion we had about loss and damage is important. You asked Rudra about that. And Rudra gave you a really snotty answer, didn't you, Rudra?
You didn't like that at all, did you?
You said, when do countries ever cooperate? What has Pakistan got for its floods? Actually, India has given 18,154 crore to international development this last year. That's $2.25 billion US dollars. And they did contribute to Pakistan's floods. So, you know, well done, India. Well done, India. The Global Fund. No, you're absolutely right. And actually, I think that was where Laura's original question to me about the 30 by 30 by 30 was heading. Yeah. What is 100 billion? The best speech at COP26 was by Mia Mottley. And she stood up at the beginning, the Prime Minister of Bermuda, and she said, "You have not been able to deliver on your promise of 100 billion. You tell us there isn't the money. Really? Over the past 10 years, you have created $18 trillion of quantitative easing in order to get yourselves out of the problems of the global financial crisis and the pandemic. Don't tell us there's not enough money. You can produce it when you want, 18 trillion of it you did, and you can't bring us a poxy 100 billion a year. It's not on. Finance is at the core of this. We have to sort it out. It's an equitable problem. It's about fairness. It's about justice. And I want to finish with the final words that I think Sumit said. It's all of our responsibility. Thank you.
What a fantastic wrap-up. I can't thank you enough. You've nailed everything. Absolutely fantastic. Sadly, as I mentioned, our time is up, but it really has been fantastic to have you here and to hear your expertise and to summarize so brilliantly as well. So thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
Let's hear it once again for the Honourable Barry Gardiner. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, just before we wrap up now, just before our final remarks, we actually have we've got some trophies and some I think we've got some trophies and some appreciative trophies that are going to be handed out now. So a very warm welcome. I've just got a list here for all of our speakers here today. We've got some lovely things for you here now. So a very warm welcome. Please give a very warm welcome to the President of the Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Please do come up back on stage. Mr. Pratik Patwar to back on the stage to facilitate this giveaway to our speakers right now. Thank you so much. Right, I'm going to take this bit of paper now. Oh, perfect. Lovely, lovely. So, Pratik Patwari, President of the GCCI, we have these lovely tokens of appreciation. That was the word. So, first and foremost, I'd like to come up on stage, pull up on stage. Please give a very warm welcome to Professor Manoj Ladwa. Please receive this token of appreciation. Thank you so much to Professor Manoj Ladwa for setting up such an incredible event today here as well. Thank you so much. Next up, please give a very warm welcome to the Honourable Barry Gardiner MP. We just heard from him. Come on back up for your token of appreciation there. We can't thank you enough for being with us. And now finally, we heard from him earlier today. He was one of our first speakers, His Excellency Freddie Svan, Danish Ambassador to India. A very warm welcome. Look at that, something to go home with after a tough day. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to Pratik Patwari, President of the GCCI. We have a few more to give away as well. Please come on up. I'm Yogesh Parekh, Vice President of the GCCI. A very warm welcome. Yogesh Parekh, Vice President of GCCI. And thank you so much to S.J. Hedder, Principal Secretary of the Department of Climate Change for the Government of Gujarat. Thank you so much. And the final person for you to hand out your token of appreciation to is to Samir Sinha, Chairman of the India Green Building Council, who we heard from earlier as well. Brilliantly done, some fantastic dialogue today. It really has been. Thank you so much, and thank you for handing those out. Right, a warm welcome now to Dilip Padya, Honorary Secretary General of the GCCI. A very warm welcome. And it's a huge thank you to Sumit Popley, co-founder and Chief Sustainability Officer at Acacia. Thank you so much. Yes, we've had some truly brilliant panels, and fantastic to have your voice with us here today. Thank you. Really fantastic. And thank you so much to Dilip for handing that out for us as well. And also, I think this is our final set of awards now. Please welcome Apurva Shah, Honorary Treasurer. Please do come on up. And it's a huge thank you to Kunal Prasad, co-founder and COO of Cropin. Truly fantastic to hear about what you're doing and the influence that that you have at the moment as well. So very well done indeed. And our final token of appreciation is to Rudra Dalmia, co-managing partner at Green Frontier Capital. Thank you so much. I finally got your name right as well there. Thank you so much. What an incredible afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Some truly impactful leadership perspectives from our speakers today. What an insightful day we've had so far, especially, of course, in the run-up to India's commitment of being net zero by 2070. We also very much look forward to witnessing India's significant role, of course, as chair this year of the G20 and some of the significant outcomes from that forum a little later on. Once again, thank you so much to all of our speakers. Thank you for joining us here today. We really do hope that you've learned something and you take something away from the forum today. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.